I'm Jean-Hugues Migeon. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Anove International. I'm a lawyer by background. I'm a former data protection specialist at the European Space Agency, a former security and privacy officer at Ontoit, and former security and privacy officer at NN, Nationale London. For those who are in the Netherlands, probably is a good reference. We started with Yuri, my business partner, the company about a year ago. And we decided to bring Anove as a new solution to the market. Anove is basically a governance, risk, and compliance tool combined with an information security management system and a privacy management system. It is also a tool that helps you in complying with regulation. And actually, that's the angle from which we approach today. And today, I will not, let's say, deeply present the tool of Anove. Actually, there are very, very few references about the application itself, only at the very end, where we, let's say, do a summary and a conclusion about the AI Act and what you can already do with our solution. But today, the focus is really on trying to get the most, understand the most out of the AI Act, because it has been a long-standing regulation that has been in a pipeline for some time already. I see some people joining more. So the EU AI Act, we have been talking about it for quite some time already, and now it's finally here. So it has been entered into force into the 1st of August. We'll go again through the entire journey, and then the idea is to understand what's there. So just a couple of numbers. I like to start with this. Maybe if some of you already looked at our previous presentations, we are familiar with these numbers. So basically, artificial intelligence will change a lot and is changing a lot in our world. In 2025, we are expecting 175 zettabytes. So just for a reminder, basically a zettabyte is about 1,000 terabytes, whereas in 2018 we had 33 zettabytes. With artificial intelligence, we are also expecting that there will be an increase in the productivity of people, in labor productivity between 11 and 37% of increase in labor productivity, depending on which field you are located. Then we expect also that 14%, or actually let's start with 32% of jobs will face substantial changes. That basically means that, well, 1/3 of us will face changes, and I think actually 100% of the attendance today is definitely feeling some changes due to artificial intelligence. And we are also expecting 14% of jobs to be purely and simply replaced. So basically, they will replace jobs of individuals, mainly highly repetitive tasks. These numbers, they come from the OECD report from 2021. What we can do is that we can put the slides available after this webinar. So feel free to go through the entire slide deck. So, well, I think that most of the attendance here came with one question in mind. Actually, when you look at EU AI Act, you think, well, one more regulation into my scope. What is the minimum that I need to do to comply with the EU AI Act? That's, I think, the question that I hear the most. I heard it a lot with GDPR. What do we need to do? What's the minimum viable compliance that we can do? And then I receive now the same questions about the EU AI Act. So before I dive into this question, I want to maybe go through the entire EU AI Act journey. I will be, throughout all the slides, referring to EU AI Act or EU Act or AI Act. I'm always referring to the same regulation, of course. You have the reference here. I'm not gonna I'm going to save you the reading of that very long reference. So, well, it all started in 2021 when the European Commission proposed a draft text of the EU AI Act. What happens is that this is a proposal from the European Commission, so the executive power of the European Union, and then they sought for opinions from various bodies of the European Union. So we had the European Economic and Social Committee, we had the European Committee of the Regions, and the European Central Bank. Each of them, they came up with suggestions or actually changes in the text for the reason that they have a direct involvement regarding artificial intelligence. So for the first two ones, they were mainly about the social impact of the artificial intelligence. And for the central bank, it's actually a very interesting opinion. It's a piece of paper of about 10 pages. You have some summarized versions as well. But basically, they explain that they refuse to become the supervisory authority for EU, the enforcement of the new act, and they suggest the creation of a new supervisory authority, which would be the EU AI office, and that's actually where it led as of today. So that was between that period. What happened is that in January this year, so 2 years, even 3 years elapsed, there has been the European Parliament that reviewed it first, and then in March 2024, after 170 amendments, they decided to approve their own version of the EU AI Act. I see some people have troubles joining in, so I'll readmit everyone. So that's where it was in March 2024. So this was the first reading. So the first reading is EU Commission sends it for opinions, then sends their draft to the Parliament, so the legislative power in the European Union. And then the European Parliament is reviewing it, amending it, and then sending back a draft to the European Commission. Usually they work in close relationship. Then if European Commission agrees, let's say if European Parliament and European Commission agrees, then they send it to the Council of the EU, which is a different organ. And the Council of the EU is basically all the ministers of the relevant of each country, but let's say the equivalent of the Minister of Technology for each country that will meet, and they need to approve altogether and adopt the text. So that's what it's called the third reading. And then in June 2024, the European Parliament and the Council of the European Union, so the ministers and our legislative power in the EU, signed the final version, and it acted the entry into force of the EU AI Act on the 1st of August 2024. So 20 days after the signature by the European Parliament. Now, okay, that's the latest news. Now, what will happen in the coming months and years? So by February 2025, so 6 months after the entry into force of the EU AI Act, all prohibited system by that date will have to be taken out of the market. There has been a list of prohibited system. We'll go through that list a bit later, but they need to be taken out from the market. So that's the grace period for the prohibited system. By August 2025, so 12 months after the entry into force, the obligations on general purpose AI governance will be applicable. So most of the obligations will be applicable. By August 2026, so 24 months after, 2 years after, all the obligations defined in the Annex A for high-risk system, so the one that will cause the most likely issues and the one on which you will have to do most of the work, will also have to be compliant with that regulation, and that will be the end of the progressive grace period. And then what will happen is that the EU AI Act from August 2026 will become fully applicable, and supervisory authority will be able to perform sample checking the same way that the data protection authorities were performing sample checking and with GDPR, and which led to various investigations and fines. Now, okay, we know where we were, where we are now, and what to expect, but who exactly is concerned by the AI Act? What's the scope of it? So let's start first by the material scope of the AI Act. So this is the definition of what AI is according to the regulation. I will spare you the reading. I will do what I call a translation from legalese to normal words. So the translation is basically an AI system is a system that makes predictions or suggests contents or make decisions that affect both physical and digital space using method like machine learning, learns from data, etc. The AI systems can work on their own or be part of another product. So it's also built-in AI. It's either it's either built-in or separate. And the adaptability of an AI system means that it can change its behavior while it's being used. So these are the main elements. So with this definition, we are excluding, for example, high automation, or typically, I got the question once about Excel macros, like very advanced Excel macros. These are not in scope of the AI Act. Now that we know the material scope, so let's say what's the object that is concerned by AI Act, it's important to take a look at the territorial scope. So geographically speaking, who is concerned by the AI Act? Let's say the natural thought process would be, well, only European companies, but that would be wrong. Actually, that was already what a lot of people thought about GDPR, but it goes beyond that. So basically, providers introducing AI system into the EU market, regardless of their geographic location. We are talking about providers and employers of AI system outside the EU, but where the output can be used within the EU. So if you are an EU company using AI for your subsidiary in India, well, you will still be deemed to respect the compliant to the EU AI Act. Then we are deployers of AI system. We'll see the definition later. Importers and distributors of AI systems into the EU market. So basically, local entities that distribute, for example, American AI models inside the European Union, and manufacturer who are providing products on the European market with embedded AI system. That goes for cars, for example. That goes for most vehicles, but also for example, agricultural machinery, etc., etc. So, oh, there you go. So it's any business or organization that offers AI system that can impact individuals within the EU and that will need to comply to the EU AI. So which means that regardless, it will be Rabobank, Dutch a company who could, for example, provide loans outside the EU, but then use an AI system. That can be Netflix. There's already AI into the Netflix search engine. And there is, of course, Google. Now, this is what is in scope of the AI Act, but I think it's important to know what is out of scope of the AI Act. So first, the AI Act will not apply to AI research and development before commercial release, which means that if your company is right now developing an AI, but not yet commercializing it or having external users on your AI on your system, then the act does not apply yet. For free and open source software, so unless they have a high risk or high impact, but basically here we are relying on the responsibility of the users of the open source software. This is to really foster cooperation on open source AI models. AI systems for military and defense use, AI systems for only scientific research. Here, there is a bit of a trick. And actually, while preparing with this webinar with Yuri, we had a conversation about, okay, but what is meant by scientific research? And to be honest, well, it's still quite difficult to gather, let's say, know what is gathered under this scientific research domain. AI systems that were on the market before the act, so before 1st of August, unless they are significantly modified. Say that you had an AI system, you didn't touch it since the 1st of August, and you will never touch it again. In theory, the AI Act will never apply to that system. I doubt that you want to leave it untouched, but well, this is a possibility. And AI system used for personal use, only for personal use. So now that we know what's in scope, what's out of scope, let's try to understand the reasoning, what's the logic behind. Why did we adopt an EU AI Act? Well, I have two versions. I have the one according to the text that is displayed in the text itself, so according to the EU, this one, and then there's, let's say, a more geopolitical. So first, why the EU AI Act? Actually, if you read the text, so you can go to the European Union legal website, you will have the very first paragraph, so recital 1, that will tell you the purpose of the regulation is to improve the functioning of the internal market, etc., etc. So this is the justification. What do we mean by that? Well, it's very simple. Translation: the goal is to address AI risks, to ban unacceptable practice, identify high-risk applications, sets clear requirements for them, define obligations for the providers of AI, require conformity assessments before they are put onto the market, enforce regulations post-market, so also continuous improvement, and establish a governance at both the European and national level. So this is more, let's say, the translation of this recital, but this is the approach that is put forward by the EU. Now, there is a bit more to it. It's, let's say, a very geopolitical, important geopolitical topic for the reason that today, as of today, and this is a personal interpretation, there is three models in the world of three approaches to artificial intelligence in the world. So the first one is the European one. So we are trying to pioneer in data regulations. We are trying to govern it. So we try to be the first one to bring strong regulations to really help companies to have a framework within which they can work and then develop their AI services. That's what we call an horizontal regulation, because this act is actually part of a package for the digital strategy of the European Commission. So we have the EU AI Act, but we also have the Digital Market Act, the Digital Services Act. If you have any question about this text, we can discuss it maybe a bit later. Usually I have a slide or two about these ones, but for the sake of keeping the time here, I will not deal with them today. Here, the focus is really to be competitive and to have interoperability between the different models so that we really avoid a vendor lock-in from the European Union, because Europe is a bit behind in terms of technology and production of hardware. And the idea is to really bring the balance back between EU, Asia, and the US. Now, the second model is, of course, the US one, which is no regulations or more very low level regulation, a more laissez-faire approach, where we have some regulation at a state level, but not at the federal level on purpose. Here, the goal is to really focus on innovation in industrial and private sector, and we'll see later what are the consequences, or we'll regulate later through the market or through audits, through assessments, etc., etc. You have also strong restriction on external providers, so non-US providers, mostly from China, but also from Europe, where you have more stringent requirement and actually whole parts of the market in the US that are completely closed to non-American, non-US companies. Their concern in the US is facial recognition and racial bias. So also in the issue, for Europe, it's mostly not so much about fundamental rights, but also about, well, being still a player and having a say in the competition. And the US, there is a big requirement, as they are the leaders, about racial bias, so racial discrimination, because these are, and it reflects, and that's also my opinion, is that AI is actually just making bigger the societal issues of each, let's say, region. So that's the concerns and the approach in the US. And the third model towards AI is the Chinese approach, which is a very central approach with a very strong control by the central government, by national security. So you have a very centralized legislation. They were actually the first one, Europe was not, in 2017, that already developed an AI strategy. And here they really want to position their new tech leader as also AI leaders against the the US companies. There is an accountability for the companies and for content moderation and algorithmic recommendation. And let's say their concern is more about misinformation or fake news or any information that could go against or cause troubles in the public order. And there they have an extensive use of facial recognition, which would be really problematic in Europe and US, and also of public surveillance. It's not necessarily better or worse, it's just that it also reflects the position of the population and the concept of privacy that differs from one culture to another. For example, in China, I've spent some time working and studying in China. In China, privacy is not so much important compared to the common good and the public order within the country. So everyone needs to live together and needs to respect each other, and the government has to, or at least it's perceived that the government has to make sure that everyone can live the way they want, but they can live, let's say, a secure and a secure life. So that's really the approach. So these are the three models, and these are the reasons why we have now such a stringent requirements, stringent regulations within our market. Now, as I said, you're still wondering the same question. I did not answer that yet. What is the minimum that you need to know or to do to comply with the EU AI Act? Well, now I think it will be almost the time to reply to that question. But first, before I reply to that question, that's also my way of keeping you in suspense. I want just to talk about what happens if you don't comply to that regulation, because for me, that's also a very important point. So I think you all know more or less about GDPR. Now I think everyone knows about it, but just depending on people that we have in attendance, depending how close you were to it. Well, GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, was quite revolutionary in the system of fines, because that was one of the first regulation that was imposing, well, a fixed amount. That's not new, but some proportion of the annual worldwide turnover, and it was 20 million euros, or 4% of the annual worldwide turnover, whichever is the highest or the higher. And it really led to very big fines, such as 200 million for British Airways, 1 billion for Meta, although now there are higher fines for, let's say, the monopoly that Google has as well, because following regulation, other regulation followed up on this way of fining companies. But basically, 6 years after the enablement, the entry into force of GDPR, well, we can see that we had a lot of fines. So approximately 1.5K, 1,500 fines, a bit more now, maybe 1,700. And most of them led to very big fines. On average, I think because you have a couple of very big ones, but you have also a lot of very small ones, but the small amounts are very big for the size of the companies. So that's GDPR, 20 million, 4%. Now, the EU AI Act comes with 35 million, or 7% of the worldwide turnover, whichever is the higher. So that now we are almost doubling the fines of GDPR. So a fine that was 200 million for British Airways would now be 350 million. So, well, with these numbers, we can easily, let's say, lose track, but that's a huge amount, and that's actually the biggest amount that any regulation had in the world. Now, of course, these are usually for the biggest company. So, and the also the novelty with the EU AI Act, although there was an attempt with GDPR, is they divided subcategories of fines that are also a bit lower, but that are still very relevant for companies. So we have another subcategory that would be 15 million or 3% for infringement on high-risk AI obligation. So if you have something that really impacts the rights of individuals or have very disastrous consequences on society. You have 15 million of 3% for general purpose AI. I don't think in the attendance we have general purpose AI companies, but just in case, that's like OpenAI, or that's, let's say, more the ChatGPT, more than OpenAI, ChatGPT, that can be, of course, Claude or Gemini, etc. So we'll see what are general purpose AI a bit more in details afterwards. And then that's the one that is maybe the most relevant to all of us, is 7.5 million or 1% for just supplying incorrect, incomplete, or misleading information. So basically, if you are not in control of the AI product that you have, and it leads to incorrect or incomplete information that, of course, would have disastrous consequences, you can be held accountable up to 7.5 million or 1% of your annual turnover. This is enormous, and that puts really the responsibility also on the users. So it's not only OpenAI or Google that provide you the foundation models that will be responsible, but also you, if you develop a tool based on these other models, you will be held responsible. So that's really, really a big shift. Now, let's get into the text itself. So the text itself is basically no more than just a risk-based approach to AI system going through 70 articles. And the goal here is really to focus on a couple of elements, the most important elements. I will not, let's say, really get into the detail of, okay, but if you are a provider, but also an importer, and that you only do this is something that, of course, we can do, but in 1 hour, we cannot get to that level of details. But of course, feel free to ask. And I'm more than happy to spend some time to maybe review the situation with you in a separate session. Now, risk-based approach. So first, to understand the risk-based approach, we need to take the same distinction that the AI Act does. They distinguish single purpose AI systems, so something that always do the same thing, and general purpose AI systems. If your AI model just does a couple of services, but all related to the same, such as, for example, at Anove, we have Anove AI, which helps you in defining risk descriptions, control descriptions, in finding what are the most relevant risks, finding who maybe is the most relevant person for naming them as the owner of a control of a risk. These are typically, well, multiple functions, but it's just a single purpose, which is mainly for governance, risk, and compliance. When we talk about general purpose AI, it's an AI that is capable of doing a lot of different tasks. The new ChatGPT 4.0, for example, can analyze pictures, create pictures, analyze data, provide you with code, etc., etc. Alexa, typically, or Siri are also general purpose AI systems because they really interact with many devices and interact with you in different ways, can analyze multiple types of data. So single purpose AI and general purpose AI. The distinction is very important because the requirements will be different. Because of our attendance today, and once again, I think most of us will be concerned by single purpose AI. Even if you have 10 functionalities, you will still probably fit into the single purpose AI. There, we have an approach that will be based on the type of risks. So it's actually the result of your risk assessment that will define what you need to do and not the technology that you use. So that's where also it differs. Usually, we would say, okay, if you use a cloud-based solution, then you have these requirements. That's typically for the German Cloud Act, where it says, okay, if you have a cloud-based solution, you need to have your data centers in Germany if you are doing this. Here, it's the other way around, is that, okay, what are the risks? Okay, if this is the risk, then these are the requirements. So we have, from, let's say, the least risky process to the riskiest one, we have AI systems with just general risks, so like any other system. So there are no restrictions, there are no specific requirements. It's actually, you just have to perform the traditional security, risk, and quality management processes that you usually have in your own industry, but it's no additional requirements. Typically, an example is predictive maintenance or prediction, like Anove AI, for example, where we can help you in predicting the risks, but also in generating some small content. Very low risk approach. Then you have the ones where you can have some transparency risks. So here you will have obligations on being very transparent with the user or the end customer. That's typically chatbots, sorry, deepfakes. Any interactions with an end user. Here, you will just need to inform a lot, so perform some additional assessment, but inform a lot the users about, this is how we train our data, this is the model that we use, this is make sure that you verify the information, all these types of information that can be provided. I put as an example, maybe some of you know Intercom for the knowledge base, or for we use it, for example, with Anove for providing an interface with our customer through the application. They have a platform called FinAI that helps you in dealing with the tickets of your customers. Typically, this is more for transparency. We don't use it, but typically you could, if you were to use it, you have to indicate you use it, and also make sure that you have the proper information requirement in place. And then we dive into, let's say, the juiciest part, which are high risk system and the unacceptable risk AI systems. High risk, it's basically a list that you have in Annex 1 and 3 of the regulation, or 2 and 3, sorry. No, 1 and 3. It's basically, it's permitted, but you have very stringent requirements. That's really the core of the AI Act. And you have to do it before you launch it to the market. Typically, use of AI in recruitment, that's something that you really need to be very, very careful when you do. Background screening, recruitment, etc., etc. We'll see a bit more in details right after. As an example, I put LinkedIn. And then we have, so LinkedIn Recruiter. So if you recruit through LinkedIn, they have a predictive AI, etc. And then we have the unacceptable risks, the one that are prohibited, no waiver, no exception permitted. That's social scoring, typically. So the Chinese social score that would never work in Europe. Now, what do we mean? And let's put that on the side away. What do we mean by prohibited system? What's prohibited? Manipulation techniques that are based on AI. We are social scoring, as I just mentioned. We have risk assessment on natural persons. So, for example, for that's there. It's a bit more. For classifying people per gender, per ethnic groups, etc. Biometric classification, categorization. So typically also based on blood results or medical results or eyes, etc. Real-time remote biometric identification. So here we mean, in theory, surveillance with cameras and AI-based or AI-enabled CCTV. But to this prohibited system, there is some exceptions, notably for every category that are listed in the Annex 2 of the text. Basically, we're talking about defense, counterterrorism, law enforcement, military, etc., etc. So there are some restrictions, but they are submitted to additional requirements as well. Facial recognition, where you scrap a lot of data online of people and you try to provide a facial recognition, and identifying emotions in workplace. So and education. So just to try to predict how people feel, etc. You cannot do that. So typically these are problems that were posed. So these are for the prohibited system. This system, they will need to be shut down before February 2025. So you still have a 6 months grace period. But if, for example, typically identifying emotions in workplace, that's something that you were not necessarily thinking as a problematic or with maybe the well-being of your employees in mind. Typically, that's something that you need to shut down as much as possible. Then, what are we talking when we talk about high-risk system? And there we will do a distinction where we have high-risk AI systems and high-risk AI application. The difference, a system is basically, well, really focusing on where, let's say, the as part of a bigger system. That's more like it. An AI application is more like a domain in which you use the technology. So typically, we're talking about a high-risk AI system that are used in specific domain as a safety component, and this list is not exhaustive. Civil aviation, vehicles, personal protection, rail system, etc., etc. You have this list also in the EU AI Act. We have this list also, of course, in these slides. So feel free to ask them. You can send me a LinkedIn message, or you can contact us on our website if you want these slides. You can take a look at it. And if we want more information, we can also. I'm very keen on discussing it on it. Toys, typically, or lifts. These are domains where you will have high risk for the individuals. And then we have high risk applications. So these are more domains in which the application are likely to pose risks to consumers. Biometrics, typically education, also due to the type of people that are subject to the AI Act, that they might be that to the AI application. Typically, they can be in a position of weakness where they are learning, so they will take things more for granted. So misinformation can be a big problem there. Essential private public service, migration, critical infrastructure. So that makes a link for those who know about NIS2, the Network Information Security Directive. Employment, law enforcement, and administration of justice and democratic processes. So these are typically the application that are listed in Annex 3 this time. You can it's actually a very clear annex where you can see the applications, and they really detail for each of this category what they mean, and they give examples as well. So say that you are doing a high risk application. What do you need to do? What to do? So the first thing is you have the risk management system dedicated to AI, or let's say complement the one that you currently have, that shall cover multiple phases of the AI system lifecycle. So the design, but the running, and also its decommissioning. So it's very important. And you have to apply 3 measures that are safety by design, protective measures, and information for safety. So information also on the safe use of the AI model. And it's actually quite funny because it's, well, quite novel. It was one of the amendments of the parliament. Set up a quality management system. And that's actually quite a funny requirement, because we didn't have that with GDPR. So it's not only about risk management and security, but also about the quality of it. And here they really clearly state out for pre-market. So you have regulatory compliance strategy, know what you need to comply to and how you will do it, design control and verification, system examination, testing, validation of the systems, and the technical specification. Then post-market, so once you commercialized it, quality control, report of incidents and monitoring of the systems, and then continuous improvement of your system with data management and procedures, logging and monitoring, reporting and managing a contact with the authorities, record keeping, and demonstrate your accountability regarding these AI systems. So these are, let's say, what you need to do with AI systems. Now, All this is what you need to do. That's the least, actually, that's really the minimum that you need to do if you encounter a high risk application or if you have a high risk application within your landscape. These requirements are for single purpose AI systems. So basically, the ones that have a very limited scope that can accomplish only a few tasks, etc. If you use or put at the disposal a general purpose AI, then you are going to a different level. What we mean in general purpose AI, what we see in general purpose AI is that we need to actually differentiate between general purpose AI models, so the ones that you use, ChatGPT, Gemini. I also put Canva because it's actually becoming more and more general, and high impact general purpose AI models. So the ones that pose a systemic risk. Systemic as not systematically but more systemic as it poses a threat or a risk to the system itself, to our ecosystem, to individuals, to the whole supply chain. And here we are mainly talking about the foundation models that are provided: OpenAI, Llama, Claude, Palm 2, Mistral, and so on and so on, because they will serve as a basis for so many other AI systems that they can be the source of a very strong risk for the entire AI ecosystem, and they pose, therefore, a systemic risk. It's actually a bit the same approach as the issue that we had with Windows and Microsoft in general, that Microsoft causes a systemic risk for the entire business landscape in the world, because whenever there is an issue, a very strong issue with Microsoft, a huge part of the economy of a lot of countries is impacted. So Microsoft itself, or CrowdStrike typically, was a systemic risk that came true. Now, what are the obligations for a general purpose AI? On that part, what I'll do, and also because I see the time, I will not go too deep into that. You can also look at it with our slides, because my assumption is that in our attendance today, no one is yet proposing general purpose AI, and I really want to focus on really what's useful for you. But basically, general purpose AI, you have to provide technical documentation that needs to be up to date and send it to the EU AI office and to the national authorities. So the same way you would send a DPIA, data protection impact assessment, to the data protection authority. They need to protect intellectual property rights, trade secrets, confidential business information, enable understanding about the limitations of the model that you propose, and then comply with copyright law, and especially the EU one. And then for high impact ones, so the foundation models, they need to comply with all the requirements, of course, have specific model evaluation, assess and mitigate the systematic risk that they cause to the entire ecosystem that they propose their model to, conduct adversarial testing, keep track of the documentation, and report directly to the EU Commission and to the EU AI office, and ensure sufficient cybersecurity protection, and report on also the energy consumption of their model. That's also an interesting one. That's, let's say, also the link with, let's say, the limitations that we're trying to reach now in terms of resources limitations that we have, not only in terms of energy, but also in terms of chipsets, etc., etc. Now, we saw single purpose, general purpose AI, that we know a bit more what are the requirements, but who does what, and how do we qualify each person? So what are the roles and responsibilities? So it's important that you know where you stand regarding AI Act, because also your implication in these requirements, in these assessments, in this compliance strategy and requirements will differ depending if you are an importer, a provider, etc., etc. So we have 4 roles that are defined by the EU AI Act. First one is provider. It's if you developed an AI system or a general purpose AI model or an AI system, and you put it on the market. Either it's for free or for payment. That's not taken into account. It's if you provide an AI system to the market. You might be a deployer. And I think that's what most companies or people here today in our companies will be in, is basically being a deployer is you use an AI existing open source or an existing AI system that's provided by a provider, but it's under your authority and you decide its use. You provide it to your employees or you provide it as maybe to your own customers. You will be considered as a deployer and you will, of course, have a responsibility and a higher accountability in that regard. You can be a distributor, so you are part of the supply chain of a provider or an importer. So basically, if you are a data center that provides hosting for a provider or an importer, typically that will be your role. So that's a bit more limited. And then we have importer. Importer is even more restricted. It's basically you have a non-EU company that provides or deploy or distributes AI model, and they need to have a legal or natural person in the EU, and you are doing it on their behalf. So either you have their name or their trademark, and you provide it onto the European market typically. And that's where it's important to note that it's any natural or legal person. Natural person, meaning that if you are a freelancer and you are providing an AI model that has been developed in Dubai, you are the importer of this AI model, which means that you have an accountability, even though it's a very small model and you are just by yourself and you're just not even have a BV or a company, then you will be an importer. So that's very important to note. Now, what does each role imply? So we have we focus on just the let's say here we will focus on the deployer role, because provider I also think that we don't have a lot here, but say you need to have a risk management system, data governance and quality management, technical documentation, etc. That's for the provider. So most of the administration struggle and burden will be on the provider, but as a deployer, you're not exempt of requirements. First, you need to apply the instructions of the provider. You need to guarantee that there is a human in every process in which you involve AI. You need to validate the input data. So you are the one responsible for the data that you put into the foundation model or the AI model. You need to monitor the AI systems you provide and report systematically malfunctions, save logs, and ensure that the fundamental rights are respected, especially that you need to perform certain types of assessment. A fundamental rights impact assessment, bit similar to a data protection impact assessment, is how do you ensure typically that the data of someone will be erased, or if someone wants to be anonymous, that you can ensure it even though it's done through an AI system. And then you have additional requirements for importer and distributor, but once again, mindful of the time, I will not continue on that part. So now it's time to answer to our question. What's the least minimum I can do? We already saw that you need to establish a risk management system, a quality management system, etc. But we can summarize it into 3-4 steps. And that's also reaching the conclusion of this webinar. So what can you do after this webinar? It's actually, I really like to be very practical. And let's say that at 7:05, you want to really, get started with your compliance with EU AI Act. The first thing that you want to do is you want to inventor your current business processes that include an AI component. You want to do the ones that you know, but also really investigate the AI systems that are used within the company. If your employees are using also ChatGPT, or marketing is using Jasper, or if they are using some AI to help themselves, you want to know about it and list it. You can do that, and that's the link with, of course, with Anove. You can do that in our next iteration of our system, where we are releasing an AI and system application register, which will be linked to the traditional asset register that you have in your information security management system. Once you've done that, or let's say in parallel to doing that, you want to assess and quantify the risk and opportunities of AI components. For that, we also have a very nice template, but basically you want to assess the risks for each AI system that you're using. Make sure that you are compliant with the regulation. Typically, if you have a human interaction, or let's say human fail-safe behind, but also you want to know the opportunities of using AI within your processes. On that, we have actually a very good AI risk assessment, not directly into our tool, but the template that we provide in a service, and we can discuss about that. But basically, that really helps you in knowing, either from the management perspective or from the operational perspective, what are the risks, but also the opportunities of using AI. Once you have done a risk assessment, of course, you want to implement mitigating measures. This you also can do with Anove AI, the Anove solution, and Anove AI. And here, basically, you want to implement the right measures. And then what you want to do is explore what are the next opportunities that AI have for your business. And here, typically, it's not something you can do with our tool, but it's more an exercise that is always good to do. Actually, in most fields of your company, whatever, if you are in marketing, etc., is to do a SWOT analysis. So, for example, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, just to know, okay, there is this new technology coming to the market. We have our business activities, our business processes. What can we do about it? Shall we jump on the train? What are the opportunities for us, etc.? This is a very good exercise. These are 4 steps, in my opinion, that you can take right away, because it doesn't require a lot of resources, and starting somewhere is already starting, and it's actually a very good way to make it concrete. You can start with the inventor. I think it's pretty easy. You can start by assessing the risk, or simply developing them. Now, if, let's say, you still want to get to know a bit more, I invite you to read a paper that my business partner Yuri wrote in collaboration with Vincent van Dijk, also a partner from us. You can either, well, if you have the slides, ask for the slides, you can click on the link, but I put a small QR code in the bottom right. It was published in the ISACA Netherlands journal. And basically, they will take you through, okay, AI risk assessment, and how can you collaboratively assess risks related to AI. And actually, this is the foundation of the AI risk assessments that we have at Anove. Well, I would like to thank you all for your attendance. Are there maybe some questions? Is there someone that wants to ask questions? You can raise your hand. I can then allow you to open your microphone, and then we can go through that. I'll wait, let's say 15, 20 seconds. If I don't see any hand raised, then I will consider that it was crystal clear. All explanations were perfect, and I will leave it there. I see. There we go. I can allow you microphone. You can unmute yourself and you can ask your question.
Hello. Thank you so much. Fantastic presentation, Jean. Great intro in the most important aspect. And my specific question is regarding the educational services and implementation of and use of AI, of, let's say, aided technology in the university environment. I saw that educational and training services are considered high risk. What does it specifically mean for universities?
Yes.
Or did you already, come across some like realizations, insights that you might have from this domain. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So on that part, regarding the educational part, so well, it is listed in the Annex 3 of the AI Act, but basically what they refer to are, for example, for the admission. So for the admission process that you have for students, so that's more for the pre-selection. That's actually linked to similarly to the recruitment process where you want to you have actually as an university or as an education institution, you have to assign natural persons at any level that AI is used. So it's not a fully automated selection. That's to avoid actually any discrimination. The second part that they do is regarding the learning and regarding the outcome. So here the idea is that you need to steer the learning process. And in that sense, what they mean by steering the learning process is um, you need to make sure that AI is not hindering the whole purpose of educating the people. So that's why there needs to be also a learning process of using AI, but also of doing things without using AI. That's why this systematically falls into it. The third one is the education or the content that a person receives through an AI systems. You need to make sure that the information that you provide is integer and has been verified, and it's not sharing false information or that it's leading to misinterpretation and false information. Here really the idea is, for example, what was mentioned during the conversation of the parliament on these elements, where for example, everything that would be, for example, flat Earth. Typically, that's something that you want to avoid, or creationism. These are typically theory that are known to be scientifically untrue and that are more from part of the sect or the religion than actually real education purposes. But typically, this is something that you need to do there. And then the last one is about monitoring and detecting prohibited behavior of students. Here it's more for during tests. If you do online tests, maybe some of you pass already some certifications online using Pearson VUE or maybe some exams. That's typically what falls into this last category. Here, the idea is that yes, it will have a certain high risk, because if the AI detects that that a student cheats, but it's actually not true, or it was just looking at his or her watch, or there might be some misconception and some errors that the AI can do. And although a human can do the same error, but if it's a human, then, well, that's put on the human mistake. But there is also a whole emotional part, which you don't have with an AI system. And the consequences that it can have on an individual, typically caught cheating at an exam, could be, well, very serious for that individual. So that's why there is extra care being put in the educational system. I hope this replies your question.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. That was very helpful.
Is there any other question? Okay. Okay. I think now we are 3 minutes past 5. First of all, I would like to thank you all again for attending this session, this webinar on the 22nd of August. This was not necessarily something we could expect a lot of attendance, but I'm very pleased by our attendees today. I hope that it gives you some clarity about the EU AI Act, that maybe triggered your interest for Anove if you are not already interested in it. As usual, feel free to add me on LinkedIn, to follow us also on our LinkedIn page. Ask any questions. I'm always very keen on opening a conversation, even if it's let's say an open question that does not necessarily implies an advice, but more a reflection, a common reflection. I'm always happy to have such kind of conversation. And I think I just have to wish you all a very good evening or end of afternoon. And I hope to see you maybe in our next webinars in September. Thank you, everyone. And I wish you a very nice evening. Goodbye.